The letter trembled in Eliza Ziegler's hands, her heart pounding as she read the acceptance from the mail-order bride agency confirming her placement. Spring 1879 was bringing more than wildflowers to the dusty plains of Colorado. It was bringing her a future. After 23 years of living in her father's shadow in Boston, she was finally taking control of her own destiny. "I've been accepted," she whispered, hardly believing the words herself. "I'm to travel to Marysvale, Colorado, to meet my prospective husband, a rancher named Zachariah Rivers." Eliza folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her bodice. The stagecoach rocked beneath her as it continued westward. 3 more days of travel before she would arrive at her destination. 3 more days before she would meet the man who had advertised for a sensible woman of good breeding who isn't afraid of hard work and wants to build a life on the frontier. What Eliza didn't know was that 200 miles east, another woman was holding an identical letter. Emma Zimmerman stared at the carefully written correspondence from the marriage broker. At 24, she had survived the cholera outbreak that had taken her entire family in St. Louis. With nothing left to keep her there, the advertisement for a mail-order bride in Marysvale had seemed like divine intervention. "Mr. Zachariah Rivers," she read aloud to the empty train compartment. "Ranch owner, 30 years old, seeking a wife." The letter instructed her to arrive in Marysvale on May 10, 1879. She would recognize him by the red bandana he would wear around his neck. Emma smoothed her simple blue traveling dress and checked her reflection in the small hand mirror she carried. Her blonde hair was neatly pinned under her bonnet, her blue eyes clear and determined. She was not a conventional beauty, but she was strong, capable, and ready for whatever lay ahead. In Marysvale, Zach Rivers wiped the sweat from his brow as he hammered the last nail into the new porch step of his ranch house. The spring sun beat down on his broad shoulders as he stood back to admire his handiwork. The 2-story white clapboard house stood proudly against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, the fruit of 5 years of backbreaking work. "Looking mighty fine, Zach," called his foreman, Tom Watkins, as he rode into the yard. "Just in time for your bride-to-be, eh?" Zach grinned, pushing his hat back on his head. "That's the plan. Woman deserves a decent home if she's coming all this way." Tom dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. "You sure about this mail-order business? Never even laid eyes on the gal. What choice do I have?" Zach shrugged, his rugged features softening. "Not exactly swimming in eligible women out here. Besides, the agency assured me she's respectable and hardworking." What Zach didn't mention was the crushing loneliness that had driven him to write to the marriage broker in Denver. At 30, he had built a successful ranch with over 200 head of cattle, but every night he returned to an empty house. He wanted someone to share it with, someone to build a future with. "Well, just 3 more days until she arrives," Tom said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Better get cleaned up. You look like something the coyotes dragged in." Zach laughed. "I've got time. Need to check the north pasture first. Thought I saw some strays this morning." As Zach rode out across his property, he couldn't help but wonder about the woman who would soon share his name and his life. The agency had been vague about details, saying only that she was well educated, in her early 20s, and eager to start anew in the West. He hoped she wouldn't be too disappointed with what she found. 3 days later, the Marysvale stagecoach station buzzed with unusual activity. Word had spread about the arrival of a mail-order bride, and several of the town's more curious residents had found reasons to be nearby when the stage pulled in. Eliza Ziegler stepped down from the dusty coach, her legs stiff from the long journey. Clutching her small valise, She surveyed the frontier town with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. Marysvale was smaller than she'd imagined, a single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church steeple rising above the general store, and the mountains looming majestically in the distance. "Miss Ziegler." The station master approached, checking his clipboard. "Someone should be here to meet you shortly." Eliza nodded, straightening her dove-gray traveling suit and adjusting her hat. She had chosen her outfit carefully, wanting to make a good impression on her future husband. The thought sent a flutter of nerves through her stomach. What if he didn't like what he saw? At the same moment, the 2 o'clock train from the east pulled into the station with a screech of brakes and billowing steam. Among the few passengers who disembarked was Emma Zimmerman, looking around eagerly for a man with a red bandana. It took less than 5 minutes for the confusion to become apparent. "I'm looking for Mr. Zachariah Rivers," Eliza told the station master. "As am I," Emma said, overhearing as she approached. "I've come in response to his advertisement for a bride." The two women stared at each other, the realization dawning slowly. "There must be some mistake," Eliza said, her voice tight. "I have the letter right here." Emma withdrew the correspondence from her reticule. "It clearly states I'm to meet Mr. Rivers on May 10th. Eliza produced her own letter, the wording identical. "As does mine." The station master backed away slightly, recognizing trouble brewing. "Ladies, perhaps you should take this up with Mr. Rivers himself. That'd be him coming down the street now, if I'm not mistaken." Both women turned to see a tall figure approaching on horseback. Zachariah Rivers cut an imposing figure astride his chestnut stallion. His broad shoulders filled out his clean white shirt, and a red bandana was tied around his neck, just as promised. His face was tanned from years under the Colorado sun, with laugh lines crinkling around alert green eyes. As he dismounted and removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair, Eliza felt her heart quicken despite her confusion. "Mr. Rivers." Both women said simultaneously, then glanced at each other in dismay. Zach looked from one woman to the other, bewilderment evident on his face. "I'm Zachariah Rivers. I was expecting." His voice trailed off as he realized what had happened. "You were expecting a bride," Eliza finished for him. "It seems you've gotten two." Emma stepped forward, her chin held high. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding. I received confirmation from the Rocky Mountain Marriage Bureau that I was selected as your mail-order bride." "As did I," Eliza added, her Boston accent becoming more pronounced in her agitation. Zach ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely perplexed. "Ladies, I assure you, I only sent payment for one bride. I have no idea how this happened." By now, a small crowd had gathered, the townsfolk not even pretending not to eavesdrop. Whispers and snickers circulated as the drama unfolded. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private," Zach suggested, acutely aware of the spectacle they were creating. "An excellent suggestion," Eliza agreed icily. Zach arranged for their luggage to be loaded onto his wagon and helped both women climb aboard, ignoring the knowing looks from the onlookers. The ride to his ranch was painfully silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. Eliza took the opportunity to study her supposed future husband. He handled the horses with quiet confidence, his strong hands steady on the reins. Despite the awkward situation, she could see why the marriage broker had matched them. There was a gentleness beneath his rugged exterior that appealed to her. Emma, seated on Zach's other side, was having similar thoughts. After losing her family, she had prayed for a new start, for someone dependable and kind. Zachariah Rivers seemed to be those things, but now this other woman threatened the future she had imagined. As the wagon crested a hill, Zach's ranch came into view, a sprawling property with the white two-story house at its center, barns and corrals spreading outward, and cattle dotting the green pastures beyond. In the late afternoon sun, it looked like paradise. "This is it," Zach said, breaking the silence. "Rivers Crossing Ranch. It's beautiful," Emma murmured, her anger momentarily forgotten. "You've built all this yourself?" Eliza asked, impressed despite herself. Zach nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "Started with nothing but 20 acres and 3 cows 5 years ago. Now I've got over 1,000 acres and 200 head of cattle." He brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and helped both women down. "I know this is an unusual situation, but I promise we'll sort it out. For tonight, you can both stay here. There's plenty of room. I'll sleep in the bunkhouse with the hands." Inside, the house was simply but comfortably furnished. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, with a rocking chair and sofa arranged before it. The kitchen boasted a cast iron stove and a sturdy table with chairs. Everything was clean and well maintained, if a bit sparse. "I'll show you to the bedrooms," Zach said, carrying their valises up the stairs. "There are 2 spare rooms one was meant for." He stopped, realizing there was no tactful way to finish the sentence. "Well, you can each have your own space." After settling in, they reconvened in the kitchen. Zach had prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee, apologizing for the lack of refinement. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town and send a telegram to the marriage bureau," he said as they ate. "There's been a terrible mistake, and I intend to get to the bottom of it." "And then what?" Emma asked quietly. "Will you choose between us?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and unavoidable. "I don't know," Zach admitted honestly. "This isn't how I imagined meeting my future wife. I never intended to put either of you in this position." "Well, I for one have no intention of returning to Boston," Eliza declared. "I've sold everything I own to come here and start a new life. And I have nothing to go back to in St. Louis," Emma added. "My entire family is gone." Zach looked from one determined face to the other and felt a headache forming behind his eyes. "We'll figure something out," he said finally. "But for tonight, let's just try to get some rest. It's been a long day for all of us." As darkness fell over the ranch, each of them lay awake, contemplating the strange turn of events that had brought them together. In her room, Eliza unpacked her few belongings, including a small portrait of her parents. Her father had been furious when she'd announced her intention to become a mail-order bride, calling it little better than prostitution. But after years of watching him drink away what remained of their once substantial fortune, Eliza had been desperate for escape. She'd wanted a fresh start with a man of substance and character. Zachariah Rivers seemed to be that. But now she had competition. Next door, Emma was having similar thoughts. She smoothed the quilt on the bed, admiring the neat stitching. The room was simple but comfortable, and through the window she could see the mountains bathed in moonlight. It was more peaceful than anything she'd known in St. Louis, where she'd been working as a seamstress since her parents' deaths. The prospect of returning to that lonely existence made her heart sink. She would fight for her place here, even if it meant confronting the elegant Eliza Ziegler. In the bunkhouse, Zach lay on his narrow cot, listening to the snores of his ranch hands and trying to make sense of the day's events. Both women were attractive, in different ways. Eliza with her refined manners and intelligent gray eyes, Emma with her quiet strength and gentle smile. Under different circumstances, he would have been pleased with either as a bride. But having them both here, expecting him to choose, that was a complication he hadn't bargained for. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Zach was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Eliza came downstairs, her hair neatly arranged and her dress freshly pressed. "Good morning," she said, somewhat stiffly. "May I help with anything?" "I've got it under control," Zach replied, sliding biscuits into the oven. "Coffee's ready if you'd like some." Emma appeared moments later, and an awkward silence fell as the three of them sat down to eat. "I need to check on a sick calf before I head into town," Zach said, breaking the tension. "I should be back by midday with news from the marriage bureau." "I'll come with you," both women said simultaneously, then glared at each other. Zach suppressed a sigh. "I appreciate the offer, but it might be best if you both stayed here and got acquainted." Neither woman looked pleased with the suggestion, but they nodded in reluctant agreement. After Zach left, the house seemed unnaturally quiet. Eliza busied herself washing the breakfast dishes, while Emma explored the living room, examining the few books on the shelf. "He likes poetry," Emma noted, surprised to find a volume of Tennyson among the practical manuals on cattle breeding and agriculture. "A cowboy who reads Tennyson." Eliza couldn't hide her surprise. "Perhaps he's more cultured than he appears." "Or perhaps you shouldn't judge a man by his occupation," Emma replied evenly. Eliza turned from the sink, drying her hands on a towel. "You're right. That was uncalled for. I never expected to find myself in a situation like this." "Nor did I," Emma admitted. "But here we are." A tentative truce established, they decided to explore the ranch while waiting for Zach's return. The May sunshine warmed their shoulders as they walked past the barn and corrals, observing the daily activities of ranch life. Several cowboys tipped their hats respectfully as they passed. "It's a substantial operation," Eliza commented, impressed by the orderly arrangement of buildings and pastures. "Mr. Rivers has clearly worked hard to build all this." "Yes," Emma agreed. "It would be a good place to raise a family." The implied competition in that statement was not lost on Eliza, but she chose not to respond. Instead, she changed the subject. "What brought you to become a mail-order bride, if you don't mind my asking?" Emma was quiet for a moment before answering. "After my parents died of cholera last year, I had few options. I could continue working as a seamstress, barely earning enough to survive, or I could take a chance on building a new life. When I saw Mr. Rivers' advertisement, something about it spoke to me." "I understand," Eliza said softly. "I came west to escape my father's gambling debts. After my mother passed, he lost himself in drink and cards. There was nothing left for me in Boston but shame and poverty." The two women looked at each other with new understanding, recognizing the desperation that had driven them both to the same decision. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a rider, not Zach, but his foreman, Tom Watkins. "Morning, ladies," he called, dismounting. "Boss asked me to check on you, make sure you're settling in all right." "We're managing, thank you," Eliza replied. Tom looked uncomfortable. "Listen, about this situation. Folks in town are already talking. 2 mail-order brides for one rancher, it's causing quite a stir." Emma blushed. "I'm sure Mr. Rivers will resolve the confusion soon." Sure," Tom said, not sounding convinced. "In the meantime, is there anything you need? Zach said to make you comfortable." "We're fine for now," Eliza assured him. As Tom rode away, the women exchanged worried glances. Public gossip was the last thing either of them needed. It was mid-afternoon when Zach finally returned, his expression grim. He found Eliza and Emma in the kitchen, where they had been preparing dinner together in an uneasy alliance. "I've got news," he said, removing his hat. "And it's not good." The women waited expectantly as he sat heavily at the table. "The marriage broker, Mr. Pearson, is gone, left town 2 weeks ago after closing his business. According to the telegraph operator, there have been several complaints about double placements." "You mean he did this deliberately?" Emma asked, outraged. Looks that way, Zach confirmed. He took payments from men looking for brides, then matched each of them with 2 or more women, collecting fees from everyone involved. By the time anyone realized what had happened, he was long gone with the money. So we've both been swindled, Eliza said flatly. I'm afraid so, but that's not the worst of it. Zach hesitated before continuing. The stage back east doesn't run again for 2 weeks, and the train only stops here twice a month. Even if you wanted to leave, you'd be stuck in Marysvale for at least a week, and the only lodging is above the saloon. That's not an option for respectable women, Emma said immediately. No, it isn't, Zach agreed. Which is why I'm proposing you both stay here until we figure something out. Eliza raised an eyebrow. And what will the good people of Marysvale think of that arrangement? Frankly, I don't give a damn what they think, Zach said with unexpected heat. This ranch is my property, and what happens here is my business. His defiance surprised both women, and Eliza felt a flicker of admiration for his protective instinct. There is another option, Emma said slowly. One of us could marry you, as originally intended. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as the obvious solution was finally voiced aloud. That would be the sensible thing, Zach acknowledged, looking uncomfortable. But I can't in good conscience choose between you when I've only just met you both. It wouldn't be fair to anyone. Life is rarely fair, Mr. Rivers, Eliza pointed out. But I agree that a hasty decision would be unwise. Then we're back where we started, Emma sighed. Zach drummed his fingers on the table, thinking, What if we gave it some time? You both stay here properly chaperoned, of course. Mrs. Hollister from town could come out to stay. We could get to know one another and then make an informed decision. The women exchanged skeptical glances. You're suggesting a courtship with both of us simultaneously, Eliza clarified. I know it sounds strange, Zach admitted, but what alternative do we have? At least this way, we all have time to consider our options carefully. After much discussion, they reluctantly agreed to Zach's unusual proposal. Mrs. Hollister, the widow of the former town doctor, was summoned to serve as chaperone, and arrangements were made for a 2-week getting acquainted period. What none of them anticipated was how quickly the routine of ranch life would draw them together. Emma, with her practical nature, took to ranch life with surprising ease. She helped with the cooking, learned to gather eggs from the cantankerous hens, and even assisted with treating a wounded horse. Her quiet competence impressed Zach, and he found himself enjoying their conversations about books and nature as they worked side by side. Eliza, despite her city upbringing, proved adaptable as well. She organized Zach's chaotic accounts, wrote letters to cattle buyers that doubled his orders, and revealed a talent for baking that made mealtimes a special event. Her quick wit and intelligence challenged Zach in ways he hadn't expected. In the evenings, they would often sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple while Mrs. Hollister dozed in her rocker. Sometimes, Zach would read aloud from his book of poems, his deep voice giving new meaning to the familiar verses. 1 week into their unusual arrangement, a spring storm hit the ranch. Rain pounded against the windows as lightning split the sky, and the creek that ran through Zach's property began to rise alarmingly. The south pasture will flood if it keeps up like this, Zach said, peering through the rain-lashed windows. The calves won't make it to higher ground on their own. What can we do? Emma asked, concerned. I need to ride out with the men, try to move the herd to the north ridge, Zach explained, already pulling on his slicker. In this weather, Eliza protested. It's too dangerous. I don't have a choice, Zach said grimly. Those calves represent next year's income. Without thinking, Emma pressed a small Bible into his hand. "Take this, for luck." Touched by the gesture, Zach tucked the Bible into his pocket. "I'll be back as soon as I can." As he rode out with his ranch hands, Eliza and Emma were left to wait and worry. The storm intensified, the wind howling around the eaves of the house. "He'll be all right," Mrs. Hollister assured them, though her own face was pinched with concern. "Zachariah Rivers knows this land better than anyone." Hours passed with no sign of the men. Emma paced by the window while Eliza kept the coffee hot and the fire blazing. Finally, well after midnight, they heard horses in the yard. Rushing to the door, they found Zach dismounting wearily, his clothes soaked and mud splattered. "Got them all to high ground," he reported, accepting the towel Eliza handed him. "Lost 2 calves to the flood, but could have been much worse." "You're bleeding," Emma noticed, pointing to a tear in his sleeve where blood seeped through. "Branch caught me when I was pulling a calf from the water," he explained, wincing as he removed his coat. "It's nothing serious." But Emma insisted on cleaning and bandaging the wound, her gentle hands working efficiently as Eliza prepared hot food and coffee for Zach and the returning ranch hands. As they tended to him, Zach looked from one woman to the other with growing confusion. In just 1 week, he had come to care for both of them in different ways. Emma's quiet strength and compassionate heart called to something deep within him, while Eliza's intelligence and determination made him see possibilities for his ranch and himself that he had never imagined. How could he possibly choose between them? The next morning, with the storm past and the damage assessed, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. Sheriff Maxwell rode up to the house just as they were finishing breakfast. "Morning, Zach," he called, dismounting stiffly. "Ladies." "What brings you out this way, Sheriff?" Zach asked, stepping onto the porch. Maxwell looked uncomfortable. "Got some complaints in town about your situation here. Reverend Parker is particularly concerned about the propriety of it all." Zach's expression hardened. "Everything here is above board, Sheriff. Mrs. Hollister is chaperoning, and no one's reputation is at risk." "I understand that," Maxwell said placatingly. "But you know how people talk. 2 mail-order brides living with one rancher, it's causing quite a scandal." "A scandal not of our making," Eliza pointed out, joining them on the porch. "We were all victims of fraud." "That may be so, miss," the sheriff acknowledged, "but the fact remains something needs to be done. Reverend Parker is suggesting that Mr. Rivers make his choice and the other lady return east at once." Emma had come outside as well, and now she stepped forward. "And if neither of us wishes to leave," the sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that complicates things." "Sheriff," Zach said firmly, "I appreciate your concern, but this is a private matter that we will resolve in our own time." "Fair enough," Maxwell conceded, "but don't be surprised if the Reverend pays you a visit himself. He's quite worked up about this." After the sheriff departed, the mood at the ranch was subdued. The outside pressure had made their unusual situation even more tense. "Perhaps I should be the one to leave," Emma said quietly that evening as they sat around the fireplace. "I have less to offer than Eliza." "That's not true," Zach protested immediately. "Emma, no," Eliza said at the same time, surprising herself with the vehemence of her objection. Over the past week, she had developed a grudging respect for the other woman's practicality and kindness. "This is ridiculous," Zach said suddenly, standing up and pacing the room. "We're all adults. We shouldn't let town gossip dictate our decisions." Mrs. Hollister, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, finally spoke up. "If I may offer an observation." At their nods, she continued, "In my 65 years, I've seen all manner of relationships. Some that looked perfect on paper turned out miserable, while others that no one would have put together found deep happiness. The heart knows what it wants if we listen to it. Her words hung in the air, forcing each of them to examine their true feelings. The next day, as if summoned by their thoughts, Reverend Parker arrived at the ranch, his black coat buttoned tightly despite the spring warmth. "Mr. Rivers," he said stiffly, declining the offer of refreshment. "I've come to address the immoral situation you're harboring here." Zach's jaw tightened. "There's nothing immoral happening at my ranch, Reverend. Two unmarried women living with a bachelor. The entire town is talking," Parker insisted. "It sets a terrible example." "With all due respect," Eliza interjected, "our situation is the result of fraud, not immorality." "Nevertheless," the Reverend continued doggedly, "it cannot continue. I demand that you make a choice, Mr. Rivers, and that the other woman leave immediately." "You're not in a position to demand anything on my property," Zach said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Then perhaps the church will need to take action," Parker threatened. "Moral censure is a powerful thing in a small community like ours." Before Zach could respond, Emma stepped forward, her face flushed with uncharacteristic anger. "Reverend Parker, is it not true that your church needs a new roof, and that you've been unable to raise the funds for it?" The Reverend looked taken aback. "Well, yes, and is it also true that just last month, when little Sarah Jenkins was sick with fever, it was Mr. Rivers who paid for the doctor to come from Denver?" "That's beside the point, no, it is precisely the point," Emma insisted. "Mr. Rivers is a good, honorable man who has helped this community countless times. Yet now you would condemn him for a situation not of his making." Eliza moved to stand beside Emma. "Furthermore, Reverend, if you're so concerned about propriety, perhaps you should direct your energy toward finding the man who defrauded all of us, rather than persecuting his victims." Faced with their united front, Parker faltered. I simply wanted to ensure that Christian values are upheld." "True Christian values include compassion and understanding," Mrs. Hollister said, joining them. "Something you seem to have forgotten, Thomas Parker." Red-faced and flustered, the Reverend made a hasty retreat, muttering about speaking to them again when tempers had cooled. As they watched him ride away, Zach turned to the women with newfound respect. "You didn't have to defend me like that." "Of course we did," Emma said simply. "We're in this together, aren't we?" Eliza added. Something shifted between the three of them in that moment, a recognition that they had formed a bond that transcended their unusual circumstances. That evening, they sat on the porch swing, watching the fireflies emerge in the growing darkness. Mrs. Hollister had retired early, leaving them to their thoughts. 2 weeks is almost up," Zach said quietly. "I promised you both I'd make a decision." Eliza and Emma exchanged glances, an unspoken communication passing between them. "I've been thinking about that," Eliza said carefully. "About what makes a marriage work." "As have I," Emma added, "and I've realized something important. Marriage isn't just about romance, it's about partnership, about building something together." Zach looked from one to the other, confusion evident in his expression. "What are you saying?" Eliza took a deep breath. "We're saying that perhaps there's another solution, one that doesn't require either of us to leave." "I don't understand," Zach said, though a flicker of something hope perhaps showed in his eyes. "This ranch needs more than one pair of hands," Emma explained. "It needs someone to manage the accounts, to write the letters, to handle the business side of things." She nodded toward Eliza. "And it needs someone to run the household, to tend the garden, to care for the animals," Eliza continued, gesturing to Emma. "Are you suggesting—" Zach began, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "I'm suggesting that perhaps you don't need to choose," Eliza said boldly. Perhaps what this ranch needs is both of us. Zach stared at them, stunned. But that's not. People would never accept. People already think the worst, Emma pointed out. Why not give them something truly scandalous to talk about? But how would it work? Zach asked, still struggling to comprehend their proposal. I could be your wife in name, Eliza suggested. And Emma could be your business partner officially. But in truth, we would all be partners in this ranch and in life. It's unconventional, Emma acknowledged, but then so is our situation. Zach was silent for a long moment, considering, and you both would be content with such an arrangement. The women looked at each other again, and this time their smiles were genuine. We've come to respect each other these past 2 weeks, Eliza said. I think we could build a life here together, the three of us. It won't be easy, Zach warned. The town will talk. Let them talk, Emma said with newfound confidence. We know the truth. And the truth is, Zach said slowly, that I've come to care for both of you in different ways. I couldn't bear to choose to send either of you away. Under the star-filled Colorado sky, they made their pact. It wouldn't be a traditional marriage, but it would be a true partnership built on mutual respect and growing affection. The following Sunday, Zachariah Rivers and Eliza Ziegler were married in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Emma Zimmerman standing as witness. Mrs. Hollister, sworn to secrecy about the true nature of their arrangement, gave her blessing with a knowing smile. Life has a way of providing exactly what we need, she told them, even when it comes in unexpected packages. To the outside world, Zach and Eliza were husband and wife, while Emma was the business partner who helped run the ranch. But within the walls of their home, they created their own family, bound by choice rather than convention. As spring turned to summer, the ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Eliza's business acumen led to expanded contracts for their cattle, while Emma's practical skills kept the household running smoothly. Zach, freed from worrying about every detail, was able to focus on improving their breeding stock and expanding their grazing lands. In the evenings, they would gather on the porch, sharing the day's events and planning for the future. Sometimes Zach would read poetry aloud, his deep voice giving life to the words. Other times, Emma would play the small piano they had purchased from a family heading further west, filling the house with music. Eliza taught them both to play chess, laughing at Zach's competitive nature and Emma's surprising strategic mind. Slowly, the people of Marysvale came to accept their unusual household. It helped that Reverend Parker's predictions of moral decay failed to materialize. Instead, Rivers Crossing Ranch became known for its hospitality, its fair business practices, and its generous contributions to community needs. 1 year after that fateful day when 2 women had arrived on the same stagecoach, they celebrated with a picnic by the creek that ran through the property. The spring wildflowers were in full bloom, painting the meadow in vibrant colors. I have something to tell you both, Emma said as they finished their meal. Her hand rested protectively over her still flat stomach. We're going to have a baby. The joy on Zach's face was unmistakable as he gathered her in his arms. Eliza joined the embrace, her own eyes shining with happy tears. I never imagined I could be this happy, Zach confessed. When I sent that letter to the marriage broker, I was just hoping to find one person who could share my life. Instead, I found 2. We all found what we needed, Eliza agreed, squeezing Emma's hand. A family. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, the 3 of them sat together, bound by love that defied convention and a life they had built together against all odds. 5 years later, Rivers Crossing Ranch had doubled in size and prosperity. The white clapboard house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. Emma had given birth to twin boys, Joseph and David, while Eliza had a daughter, Margaret, and was expecting their second child. To the children, both women were their mothers, each offering different strengths and lessons. Zach was the adoring father who taught them to ride and showed them the wonders of the natural world around them. The scandal their arrangement had once caused had faded into acceptance, then grudging admiration as the ranch provided jobs and stability for the community. Even Reverend Parker had come to see that their unconventional family was built on love and respect, values his church supposedly championed. On a warm summer evening, as the children played in the yard and the scent of Eliza's apple pie wafted through the open windows, Zach found Emma watching them from the porch. "Any regrets?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "We found our own way, didn't we?" Eliza joined them, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Who would have thought that a mail-order bride mix-up would lead to all this?" "Sometimes the best things in life come from the biggest mistakes," Zach replied, embracing them both as the Colorado sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop to the life they had created together at Rivers Crossing Ranch, a life built on courage, compromise, and love that transcended convention. In the years that followed, their family continued to flourish. Emma's twins grew into strong young men who showed their father's affinity for ranching and their mother's quiet determination. Eliza's daughter Margaret inherited her mother's sharp mind and became the first woman in Marysvale to attend university, studying business before returning to help run the ever-expanding family enterprise. Eliza's second child, a son they named William, combined his father's physical strength with his mother's eloquence, mediating disputes and eventually representing the region in the state legislature. The three partners at the heart of Rivers Crossing Ranch never regretted their decision to forge their own path. They had faced adversity together, weathered storms both literal and figurative, and built a legacy that would endure long after them. What had begun as a mail-order bride mistake had become the most fortunate accident of their lives, proof that sometimes, when life doesn't go according to plan, it's because something better is waiting just around the corner.